Irvin, it's all yours.
Y'all can see it now? Perfect. Okay. So I am doing English learners. It's a historically underserved population. Okay. So this is just food for thought. It's not so much the issue, right? According to the CDE, the California Department of Education, English learners approximately are 18 to 20% of California's entire K through 12 students. So that's over 1 million students in the entire state of California. So I'm not a math person, but that's about one fifth, right? Or 20% of the entire population. That's one in every five students. Um, so it's a large enough population that they should get more attention than they do. And because of this, some of the issues that we run into here are the issues. It's the reclassification, it becomes a bottleneck, and we end up with long-term English students, so LTELs. The reclassification purpose changes from school to school, from not school to school, district to district, and county to county kind of deal. There's a standard set by California, but then districts have their own additional testing, creating a bottleneck. Another issue that we end up with is shortage of bilingual credential teachers. So we have teachers to do it, but a few of them, for example, at the school I work with, we have five teachers. Of those five, two speak a second language. And I'm going to say that with like speak, if you can see my air quotes, right? It's a very limited. And I'm not saying that having to speak that second language makes it much better. It certainly helps. Um, According to the CDE, again, 80% of those 1 million students speak Spanish. Sure, that's a good chunk, but there is this additional 20% that speak a bunch of different other languages that we don't normally talk about, right? It's predominantly Spanish. However, that other additional is, Arabic, Farsi, a bunch of different dialects from Indian cultures, right? That are part of that 20% end up in that position. So the shortage of bilingual teachers becomes a very big deal at that point. The linguistic diversity and the family engagement gets difficult because of that, right? So the two laws that I came up with or that I thought were pretty interesting to me was Proposition 58 and Assembly Bill 2735. Now, Proposition 58 is pretty, I'm smiling because I was a few days ago old when I found out that, so what Prop 58 was, it essentially repealed Proposition 227 back in, I can't see my own, 1998, if I remember correctly. Yep. Um, what what it did was it exclusively almost made it so that students anytime after fifth grade would be in English classes only. So when I did fifth grade, fortunate. I am EL myself. I'm an English learner, right? English is my second language. I remember telling my parents, Mom, Dad, I'm in sixth grade now. I graduated. Look at me. I can speak English really well. Turns out it wasn't an option. Turns out I just had to go into the because exclusively back then, that's all you had to do. And it wasn't until 1998 that that changed that, Prop 58 gave the California school districts flexibility to establish dual language or dual immersion for stuff, right? So what I thought I was doing, hey, look at me, I'm doing a really good job. Turns out that it was just what it was. So Prop 58 overturned that exclusive only English stuff for students. So back then, it turned out to be that it didn't matter when you came in. If you came in as a sixth, seventh, eighth grader, you're going straight into English, and thus creating a whole lot of issues that we'll talk about in a minute. Okay, Assembly Bill 2735. Is it 2735? Yes. This was in 2018. I liked this one because what it did, it was essentially it gave EL students or English learning students the ability to be exposed to other schools or to all of the stuff, right? It didn't matter because of their classification that they were English learners. They were given the opportunity to take higher classes, right? An AP class or an honors class or something like that, regardless of their classification of English. So beginning in 2019, 2020 school year, the law essentially guaranteed that EL students could not be denied access to core academic subjects, graduation requirements, or college preparatory coursework solely because of their classification. Um, I wasn't in school at that point, right? But I found this interesting because what that simply meant was that students could have been, and I'm not saying that this is bad, but students in a high school setting could have been like, hey, go to culinary, go to workshop, go to do all these things. and never get prepared for a science class or never be given the opportunity to take an upper level class like an AP or an honors class that could potentially help them get into a UC or a UCS SS opportunity. So these two bills, Prop 98 and Assembly Bill 2237, I thought were interesting in that sense. Okay, so those are the things. Okay, so the impacts that it had on ELs were different, right? So it being allowed to go into a dual immersion or ESL class or EL learning class or multilingual, however you want to call it or what your district calls it, allowed students to strengthen their own identity, right? And their self-esteem, meaning when you come, if you think of yourself as an 11th grader, you're coming from a different country. It doesn't matter where you're coming from. You come from a different culture. You're used to something else. And in a lot of the different countries, especially developing countries, you're in a position where when you're 16, 17, you're almost a mini adult, right? So coming over here and being forced, to assimilate or something like that, or feeling like you needed to assimilate can be stress-inducing, anxiety-inducing, right? So it strengthens the identity of the people to be multicultural. It allows opportunity or growth to be multicultural, to be a little bit more than just having to be American or something like that, right? And it reduces from assimilation to integration of the system, right? So Prop 98 and Assembly Bill 2237 allows for a little bit of this. It also allowed for lower dropout rates, meaning, again, go back to the same image I just gave you, right? You're in 11th grade, you're coming to a new country, and now you have to, you went from likely having shorter days of schools and then being able to do something else to being here the majority of school, not feeling part of it, not speaking the language, you're not culturally into it, you don't even know, you want to drop out. But by being allowed to be in a system where you can be in class, have other friends, and likely speak the same language you do, reduce the dropout rates. And it increased the higher academic achievements, right? And the literacy. Again, you might come across students who don't speak English proficiently. However, they might have enough skill set or enough abilities to get through that AP chemistry class if they want to be in a high school setting where they're learning about a medical field or something like that, right? So the impact that these two laws had on English learners, again, I thought I was technically I never RFID at this point, right? Technically, I never reclassified from being but it gives the opportunity for students to be able to be challenged academically, be given all of the same opportunities that every other student gets, and it doesn't have that systemic barrier that they had. Okay, so that's the impacts. How can we apply this as counselors? Well, it allows us, knowing these two laws, assembly bills or propositions, it allows us to be academic advocates. And I know this master schedule is going to be controversial, right? Because it's not falling on us. However, you can be an advocate for saying, hey, let's make sure that the DLD class or the designated English learning class happens during a period that is not the same time the only AP chemistry is happening, because then we're not allowing these students, they don't have the opportunity, right? So becoming an advocate for something like that, becoming an advocate that there are multiple options for the students to be able to receive the same classes or opportunities the other ones would. Another thing, ensuring LTELs or long-term English learners that are enrolled in college prep work. This gets tricky, right? Each district, get familiar with your district, get familiar with your own stuff, that if a kid is learning, does everything in a way that academically they can get through English classes, fine. Encourage, learn your ability to opt out of those services so that they can take those AP classes, or they're in a better position to be on track for UC or CSU classes, right? Encourage, I would encourage you to target small groups for counseling, right? Facilitate groups for EL students or English learning students and newcomers so that they're comfortable with it. And most importantly, empowering parents as partners, right? The ELECs, the English Learning Committees, are important for the parents to know. One of the things I learned from these laws, I think it was Assembly Bill 2237, I might be wrong on this one, that if a group of students in one class, 20 or more in a single class, advocate or ask for something, the district is required to give them that, and or 30 kids in a school, right? So if there's an issue or a shortage of something, it's important for us to know. So these are ways for us as counselors that we can apply these academically. into our work. Here are my sources. I use the California Department of Education. And if anybody have any questions, I'd like to go. I mean, there was a lot that I learned, but 5 minutes makes it really tough.
Thank you, Kervin. That was excellent. Christina?
Okay, hold on. Let me share my screen. Oh my goodness.
Sure.
Can you see my screen?
Yeah, we can see it.
Oh, shoot. I'm sorry, you guys.
The present button's at the top right. If that's what you're looking for, Christina.
I don't know. It's not. I'm trying to see my screen and it's on my end, it keeps freezing up. I'm sorry, you guys.
If you download it, it'll be easier for you. So you could just download it as a PDF.
Can you see it now? Can you guys see that? Yes? Okay, thank you. Sorry about that, you guys. I'm going to start my timer. Okay, so I did mine on historically underserved population as foster youth for foster youth. Foster youth are children who have been removed from their homes due to abuse, neglect, or other adverse childhood experiences. According to the Children's Law Center in California, there are about 437,000 children in foster care in the United States on any given day. And in California, currently there are over 30,000 children in foster care. And the most common reason for children going into foster care is neglect, and the most common form of neglect is due to poverty. Some challenges for foster youth and education. Instability is the first one. Foster youth often change schools due to foster home placement changement, which creates a huge disruption in learning and in their friendships. According to UCLA's Center for Transformation of Schools, each time a child.
Christina, I'm sorry for cutting you off. It's still on the first slide. I think you might be like on your third one already.
Oh. Um, I don't know why it did that. I'm showing my first slide. I'm sorry, you guys. Can you guys see that?
No, we can't see anything now. So when you go to share, make sure you do the for video sharing content. Or you want to do side by side, maybe so you can see it. That might be what the challenge is.
Does somebody else want to go? I try to figure this out so I don't waste time.
Sure, no problem.
Sorry about that.
Kariyama, you ready?
Should I share?
Yeah.
Okay. So I also did foster youth. Let me just. Can you guys see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. So go ahead and start. So I will be talking about foster youth. Sorry. Okay. So issues and challenges. So for foster children have suffered through a lot of abandonment, neglect, or some form of abuse, which is why they are then placed in another home for their safety reasons. So challenges we might see is changing schools a lot, trauma and adverse childhood experiences, suffering from depression or anxiety, their education being disrupted, rates of graduation are lower, and then they struggle to have those adult figures or trusted relationships. Many of the students who are placed in foster care tend to go through their educational instability due to having to move from different homes several times. And then these experiences significantly disrupt a child's ability to learn and form their relationships. So, experiencing school mobility hurts their mental health and their ability to succeed. And if that foster child could have a stable school experience, this could be a strong way to protect that child. So the first law that I will be, sorry, let me just minimize this over here. It's not, oh my gosh, sorry. Sorry, I like cannot see my screen this way. So let me make it smaller. Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry, you guys. I don't know what happened. My bad. Can you guys see it? No, I can't.
Yes.
Okay, there you go. Okay. So then the first law that I'll talk about is the Every Student Succeeds Act. So this law was created for a path for both child welfare agencies and school agencies to develop a plan to ensure all students in foster care have that educational stability. So that supportive key elements of it is it's keeping students in their original schools when it's in their best interest, having transportation for students in their original school. If a change in school is required, the student gets that immediate enrollment, and then having a point of contact from the foster care system for the school district. And so these protections allow the students to improve attendance, build relationships with their teachers, experience less academic disruption, and enhance their emotional stability. Before this law was in place, we saw that many foster youth needed to switch schools constantly. And from this act, they found that if a student didn't change schools, their academic performance and overall well being would improve. Is it moving for you? Gosh, give me a second. I don't know why it's doing that. Okay, there you go. Okay, so then the second act is going to be Fostering Connection to Success and Increasing Adoption Act. So this act requires child welfare to take educational stability into account when deciding a child's placement. So agencies are encouraged to organize together with the schools, when possible, always keeping children at the original school, and a decrease in school changes or transfers, and create better ways to collaborate with the system and the education. So the benefits of this law is the student has a consistent education, they have a good support system in place, and it allows for students to experience less stress if change in placement is already being made. The foster connection, this act, sorry, recognizes the long-term effect of constant school changes on foster children. So the impacts that it has for mental health, the child can get a greater feel of safety, less chance of a student going through anxiety. It creates a better relationship with adult figures, and it helps support their emotional regulations. And for education, it improves their attendance, stronger academic performance, higher rates of graduation, a positive increase in school engagement, and it's considered to be a protective factor if a child has school stability, especially for a child who does experience any form of trauma. And so, as a counselor, what I would do is always advocate for the educational rights of my students, plan to work with all parties involved, which is like the social worker, administration, teachers, foster parents, constantly monitor my students' academic process and attendance, implement counseling interventions that provide the trauma-informed support with teaching students to build resilience and coping skills, inform students helpful community resource and mental health resources, because a lot of the times the school counselor is the most consistent trusted adult that the student encounters. And that is my presentation.
Thank you. Christina, did you want to try again or?
I can try again and see
Okay.
if that works. I don't know why I'm having such a trouble sharing my screen. Is anything coming up yet? Do you guys happen to see the foster youth slides? Okay, somebody else can go next.
Start sharing my screen. Okay, can you guys see my screen? Yeah, okay. So hold on, let me move this to the side. Okay, so I chose English learners as the underserved students. So a little bit of statistics. In California, we have about roughly 6 million students who are enrolled in kindergarten through 12th grade. About 1 million of those students are considered English learners, and about 900,000 are considered RFIP students, which are reclassified fluent English proficient students. How students get identified as English learners, it's when they are enrolled in school, parents are filling out forms, and in a home language surveys, it identifies them as having a primary language other than English at home. Because of that, students are then assessed with the initial LPAC, which is the English Language Proficiency Assessment for California, which indicates if English language programs and services are needed for that student. If they are, every year they take the summative LPAC test around March. And they take this test until they are considered proficient, which is the RFIP. Within this test, they need to pass the LPAC sections, which is writing, reading, listening, and speaking. They need to have a teacher evaluation, which is usually like if they get a passing grade, which is a 3. So I'm basing mine specifically on elementary because this is what I've worked with the most. And then they need to pass the basic skill performance test, which in elementary, I don't know, in general, it's the iReady test or the SBAC test. And then they need to have a parent consultation where the parents sign a form identifying that they are aware that their child has passed all the qualifications so they can reclassify. Some of the challenges that these students face academically, they have limited vocabulary, they can have difficulty with grammar, which affects their the work that they're doing. If the coursework is too focused on English, on the English language and they don't have a lot of support, then that time they can struggle with their assignments. They sometimes have lack of resources outside of school. They might be the only at home. They might only speak like a certain language. They might not speak English, so they don't get as much support. Culturally, it can be difficult for them to understand humor or context clues. Even their nonverbal communications may be different. Something as simple as making eye contact when they're talking to somebody. Some of us are used to talking directly, looking at a person making eye contact, but for some cultures that's considered rude, so they look away. And all of this can affect their confidence. They have the fear of making mistakes, whether with pronunciation or just pronouncing a word incorrectly, which can lead to anxiety, depression, and at the end of the day, make them feel isolated and lonely because of all these differences. One of the laws that I decided to choose was the Title VI of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. Essentially, it just prohibits discrimination based on race, color, and national origin in programs that are funded through federal financial assistances, including within the states and school districts. This is like an add-on to the Civil Rights of 1964 to discriminate in education, employment, and public services. It is just to use to continue funding programs that are not being discriminated against race, color, and the national origin. It provides students with language assistance for them if they are limited in English, the schools must provide translators, interpreters, and other forms to help students overcome these barriers. And just because they are students that treating the students equally, that doesn't mean that one student might need more than the other. So they're supposed to be providing equal support or equitable support. In addition to that, it's affecting them. Well, actually, no, sorry. Positively, the students have access to programs like financial aid, academic programs, counseling, and they are placed in classrooms with needed support. So, for example, they take EOD classes. As a counselor, I would ensure students have equal access by providing resources and services that the students have access to, review data like attendance and grades to identify anything that might be affecting them and just support guidance. And I can collaborate with school staff like administrators and the teachers, even parents to incorporate like an inclusive environment. The next law is the Equal Education Opportunities Act of 1974. Initially, it was started, it was a group of Chinese speaking students in the San Francisco Unified School District. They weren't receiving enough support. They were just given the same utilities, the same textbooks, the same teachers, the same curriculum, and they thought that was enough, but they weren't receiving actual support to fight these language barriers. And so the Title I, I'm sorry, this violated the Title I, which is the law that I talked about before, and it prohibited discrimination based on color, race, and national origin in federal funded programs. So schools must take steps to remove language barriers, and they can't deny equal education opportunities based on race, gender, or nationality. Now students have the opportunity to access equitable education. And as I said it before, they provide support like EOD, English language development as a course in schools, and integrated EOD like in math and social studies and sciences. As a counselor, I would monitor students' academic and emotional needs by checking in with them just to identify any challenges and just make little achievable goals to help boost their emotions and everything as a whole. I can do small group or whole group presentations on cultural awareness and build confidence within these students. And I can provide families with translated information and resources for them to access so they can also support their child as much as they can from home.
Thank you. Allison?
Okay, can you guys see that?
Yeah, we could see it.
Okay. So I chose LGBTQ plus youth for my underserved group for this presentation. While LGBTQ youth face many challenges, I found these two quotes from the Trevor Project's 2024 National Survey to be the most appropriate. LGBTQ plus youth are not inherently prone to higher suicide risk because of their sexual orientation or gender identity. Rather, they are placed at higher risk because of how they are mistreated and stigmatized in society. And the other quote is, attending a school with even one anti-LGBTQ policy is associated with higher rates of anxiety, depression, and past year suicide attempts for LGBTQ plus students. The two laws I chose that impact LGBTQ plus students are the Equal Access Act, a federal law, and the Safety Act, which is a California law. I've also included a case related to each law. So the first law is the Equal Access Act, which requires that all extracurricular clubs must be student initiated and receive the same access on the campus if the school receives federal funds. In the case of Collin v. Orange Unified School District, it was the first time that a GSA, or a Gender and Sexuality Alliances Club, was allowed to meet on a school campus. The second law is California Assembly Bill 1955, which is the Support Academic Futures and Equality for Today's Youth, or the SAFETY Act, which was signed into law in July 2024. The bill mainly focuses on the rights and protection of LGBTQ plus youth and their families to choose when they want to come out. There's currently a case, Mirabelli v. Olson, EUSD, that may impact AB 1955. So while the case awaits resolution in the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Ninth Circuit, the following language is posted at the top of the CDE's website regarding this law. So it's a difficult situation because two things are happening here. It's a federal law versus state law, and it's the rights of parents versus the rights of students. The full language of the case can be found on FindLaw, and it's really interesting to read. So the Equal Access Act, the impact that it has on LGBTQ plus students, it's positively impacted them by allowing the growth of more GSA clubs. It's been shown that access to affirming spaces reduces the risk of suicide, and GSA participation increases feelings of connectedness in schools. The percentage of students with access to a GSA club has almost doubled in less than 20 years. The impact of AB 1955, or the SAFETY Act. It also has the potential to positively impact students since it directly supports LGBTQ students and their decision to come out. Research has shown that anti-LGBTQ policies in schools lead to higher rates of anxiety, depression, students seriously considering suicide and attempting suicide. And recent politics have negatively impacted the well-being of 90% of LGBTQ plus youth, with 45% of transgender and non-binary youth reporting that they or their families have considered moving out of their state. There's also stats about there's 15 different states that have forced outing policies in their laws now, it's a little shocking. So how can I apply these laws as a school counselor? If a student is interested in starting a GSA club, I will advocate for the students if they're receiving resistance from the administration. I'll offer to be a club advisor if needed, and I'll share local LGBTQ plus resources with the students if they're interested in speakers or other support. Applying the current language affecting AB 1955 may be a little more difficult. I'll start any conversation with new students by introducing myself and my pronouns. Then I will ask them for their name and pronouns, and I will follow up this with a question about whether they feel safe using their pronouns at home. Based on their response, I will determine if they are concerned for their safety at home, in which case I will need to file a CPS report. If they don't use the pronouns at home, then I'll work with the student to see if they want support coming out to their parents and working with a local LGBTQ organization to move forward from there. The most important thing is validating the student's identity with their chosen name and pronouns. So although this isn't required for the presentation, I just want to quickly share 10 things school counselors can do to support LGBTQ youth. So it applies to how I can support students as a school counselor. So the best ways to show support and acceptance is trusting that I know who I am. These are direct comments from students based on the Trevor Project 2024 National Survey. So this is what students say. Trust that I know who I am, standing up for me, not supporting politicians who advocate for anti-LGBTQ plus legislation, looking up things about LGBTQ plus identities on their own to better understand, respecting my pronouns, showing support for how I express my gender, asking questions about LGBTQ plus identities to better understand, accepting my partners, showing support on social media, and having or displaying pride flags. Having at least one trusting adult goes a long way in supporting and affirming LGBTQ plus youth. So, and there's my resources. So thank
Thank
you. I
you.
probably went really fast through that. Sorry.
Thank you very much.
Welcome.
Well done. Jalissa?
Okay, let me share my screen. Can you guys see my screen?
Yes.
Yes, okay, perfect. All right, so my presentation will be on supporting undocumented youth, and which is a historically underserved population that really spoke to me when I was doing the research on it. So in the US, there's about 1.1 million undocumented youth throughout the US. And the three major challenges that they face currently is that they have a constant fear of deportations of either themselves or family members, which can cause mental health issues to arise, such as having anxiety, depression, or possible trauma from maybe experiencing maybe some traumatic events in the past regarding deportation. And this also creates a fear of disclosing their immigration status. Another major issue that they face is the language and cultural barriers. Kind of similar to the English learners, some of them may come from different cultures, and they have a harder time being able to adjust to the culture of that they arrive when they're here in the States. And also another major issue they face is they have limited access to financial aid and post-secondary opportunities, but regarding when they try to apply for financial aid opportunities as a senior. So one of the first laws that I found that does protect a lot of these undocumented students is the FERPA Act. So the main purpose of FERPA is that they protects the privacy of all of the students and the parents. So schools cannot disclose the students' personable identifiable information from their records without having a parent's written consent. And they also cannot disclose their information when immigration officials request it. So essentially, it makes the schools like a safe haven for these students, and it lets them be able to have another safe space to have while they're here in the States. I focused more on a court case for this one, but it's a Parler versus Doe Act. So the ruling of this court case was that a prior Texas statute that withheld many undocumented children from attending Texas public schools found that it violated the Equal Protections Clause of the 14th Amendment. And the legal president of this court case was that all students who are undocumented have the right to public education, and they cannot discriminate any students due to those immigration status. Another thing I also added, which is other important laws and policies that also affect our undocumented youth. So Assembly Bill 540, which is a California law, actually helps eligible undocumented students to be able to pay in-state tuition at California public colleges and universities. And many of these students can apply through the California Dream Act that it's available to them when they apply for their senior year for their final year in school. Another policy that is important and may apply to some of the students is the Deferred Actions for Childhood Arrivals, which is popularly known as DACA. It's a policy that provides temporary protection from deportation from some of these children, and also it allows them to be provided with a SSN and an employment authorization document that allows them to be able to potentially have the opportunity to apply for jobs or positions that maybe they were otherwise not able to due to their due to their status. And so these laws' impact on these youth is that specifically with FERPA, they reduce the fear of disclosing their personal information since they can feel that the school is there to support them, which allows them to have more of a trust within the schools and staff members when disclosing their personal information. Particularly with the Fire versus Doe Act, it allows education to be easily accessible, which eliminates those barriers for these students, and it promotes the school attendance and educational opportunities for them. Also, as for their students' mental health, their anxiety is reduced, which can improve their academic performance and overall their well-being. And then from there, they can actually build relationships with those trusted adults, which gives them a sense of belonging at the schools. As a school counselor, I will make sure that I maintain confidentiality and student and parent privacy according to FERPA, and also advocate for equal educational access for all these students. And not just that, but also provide culturally responsive counseling to these students to ensure that they feel not just inclusive, but they also feel welcomed as well. And the main thing is just ensuring that we create a welcoming and inclusive environment for these students, as some of them are coming from some of them are newcomers. Sometimes they come to the States on their own without their parents or any family members to care for them. So they may feel scared, they may feel super anxious. So I think the most important thing is creating that welcoming and inclusive environment. And some of the interventions that I would apply as a counselor is to have those individual and small group counseling sessions with these students, and to be able to reach out to the families and to ensure that they are and collaborate with community partners and agencies to connect them to the necessary resources that they need. Overall, undocumented youth do face significant educational and mental health barriers when they're in public K through 12 schools, but overall, FERPA and Pliers still have established great precedents in ensuring that these students are protected at the schools. And as school counselors, we play a major role in advocating and upholding the confidentiality for all our students. I'm like, thank you, and these are my resources.
Thank you. Rosie?
Can you guys see it? Okay. So the population that I decided to focus on was the special needs population. I decided to focus on this population since, as a guest teacher, this is the population that I've mainly worked with. So I've been able to really see hands-on the barriers and the discrimination that they feel as historically underserved students due to their disabilities. Two laws that I found that help support the special needs population is the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, also known as IDEA, which was passed in 1975. It was passed to help guarantee that students with special needs were eligible to receive free public education without any additional costs. It also helps special needs students have IEP, which is basically where teachers and therapists and parents meet. They all get together and they find learning goals and accommodations for their students that they might be requesting. And usually these IEP meetings take place annually or sometimes triannual, if depending on how long the student has been at the school. The second act is the Section 504 of Rehabilitation Act, which was passed in 1973. It was a federal civil rights law that helps protect the special needs population from experiencing discrimination in the school. It also helped students who did not qualify for IDE. So the students that usually qualify for the Individuals with Disability Education Act is usually students who have like autism, deaf, or are blind. And then for the students that qualify for the Section 504 Rehabilitation Act is usually students who probably experience like anxiety or depression. So those acts each help protect those two populations. Some current issues or challenges that I found in this population is limit to resources, so shortage of school staff, whether it's teachers, educators, or therapists. The times that I've been in classrooms, there have been times where I've had to go and help assist another instructional aid due to the shortage of the staff. I know sometimes in some schools there's only like 3 teachers that are doing special education classes, and then their classroom ratio is like 1 teacher to 18, which is a lot when they don't have enough support in there. Something else too that's a challenge in this is limited funding. So this could include not getting enough resources or money that can allow like teachers to buy like fidgets or like communication devices. There's some students that have to use like an iPad to communicate with the teacher. So if there's no funding in that, it's very hard for them to communicate. And then another, like I mentioned, unable to communicate their needs, and then difficulty managing their emotions. So if the student's unable to communicate their emotions, sometimes it can cause frustration in them because they're just trying to get their voice across, but they're unable to. So it could be very challenging for them. Some mental health related and or educational related laws. 2 laws that I found was the Americans with Disabilities Act, which was created to prohibit discrimination against individuals with disability. And then it creates equal opportunities for these individuals. So in order to have the ADA Act, they must provide a reasonable explanation for the accommodations that are being made. So if a student needs support in communicating or they need like a technology, there has to be an explanation on why they're getting this communication device or a modified class schedule. Then the second act was the Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act, also known as FERPA, which is helped to protect an individual's educational records and keep everything confidential. And then it also encourages collaboration while keeping information private. So this helps support the students' mental health because allowing them to see that they're being supported or their barriers are being reduced, it can help reduce feelings of stress or anxiety. And then knowing that their information is going to be confidential, it could also help reduce the feelings of them being discriminated from their private records being let out. Effect on students' educational functioning. So Americans with Disabilities Act helps promote a safer and more inclusive environment. It allows accommodations to occur to help support students' needs, like I mentioned, the communication devices or accessible classrooms. And then FERPA, it allows parents to access their students' evaluations or IEPs. So it allows parents to also feel involved in their students' support plan. And then it also protects students' records and allows parents and students to also feel protected. And then as a counselor, how I can advocate for my students is I can advocate for accessible classrooms, extra support. If the students need that extra help, I can meet with teachers and collaborate with them in finding ways that there could be that support for them. And then as mentioned, some students have IEPs or 504 meetings, which is where these barriers are discussed. And as a counselor, if I'm aware of these barriers, I can help create ideas that can help eliminate those educational barriers. And then always keep my students' records confidential, so make sure that my student understands and the parent that any information shared with me will be confidential. And then I can always communicate and collaborate with parents in allowing them to participate in their child's education plan. This will allow us all to work together and create the best support plan for their child. And that's it.
Thank you. Who's next?
Are you able to see it? Okay. So I also selected special needs populations similar to Rosie. I also work with special needs every now and then. My school, matter of fact, just turned into mainly ABA students as well, Gen Ed. and I'm an instructional aide for TK, so I'm working a lot with the SPED friends in TK as well. Um, Some current issues and challenges that I've noticed, there's limited resources, not enough funding or available spots. In some cases where a student is trying to get assessed for autism, there sometimes tends to be a very long wait list. And once the school gets information about a possible diagnosis, that's when they finally are able to get the ball rolling. But even then, it takes a while. There's academic challenges such as learning difficulty with some students. Um, let's see, affect students' performance. Physical barriers, not every environment is well equipped with equipment for the special needs population, and there's sometimes inconsistent communication, such as language barriers between families. My school is fortunate enough to have multiple educators that speak Spanish, so communicating with the parents has been great, especially with dual language learners and being able to get the support that the students need. There's also lack of teacher and staff training. Me, for instance, I never got the proper training for working with students and SPED, but I've learned through the guidance of the aides that work with them in particular. But personal professional training, there's not much of it. You're kind of just tossed in there. The two laws that stood out to me were the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, which provides free appropriate public education for students. It's individualized educational programs such as IEPs where the students team is able to get together and collaborate and work on goals that they want the student to attempt to meet, and special education services. The other law was Section 504, which provides students with equal access to programs and activities. It is a federal rule, which means that schools are required to create an, wait, sorry. It's a, I messed up my notes, sorry. Um, but it also prohibits discrimination from schools and public programs. The mental health and educational related laws, where Every Student Succeeds Acts, which supports social, emotional, and academic support. All students are able to have the access to high quality education. The Americans with Disability Act provides equal access, as mentioned, with education and programs, as well as accessible materials and environments for students to be able to learn. Some effects on students' mental and educational functioning. The Americans with Disability Act is very inclusive with students. They provide appropriate educational environments, and it provides students with the same opportunities as other students. Every Student Succeeds Act is school-based services such as OT, speech, and counseling. And they also work with students with forming positive and nurturing environments, as well as emotional and behavioral needs. So to be able to apply laws as a school counselor for Every Student Succeeds Act, I would assist students meeting their goals to the best of my ability, as well as providing individual and group counseling for them and advocating for the students' needs. With the ADA, I would collaborate with the teachers, support staff, and their families, and assist students in finding appropriate resources and assist with accommodations. And these are my references, and thank you.
Thank you. Next.
Okay, I'll just share my screen. Uh-oh. Okay. Okay. Hi everyone. Today, well, can you all see my screen? Sorry, I just wanted to make sure. Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So today I'll be going over LGBTQ youth as my historically underserved community. So currently,
Some of the issues that this minority group experiences are harassment, lack of representation, and scarcity of support. Just to go over harassment a little bit more, researchers have found that rates of bullying are doubled in LGBTQ plus youth in comparison to their cisgender peers. Harassment also takes form in discriminatory policies, and 2/3 of this youth group have reported experiencing harsh discriminatory policies at school. So this can be something just as harsher punishments for public displays of affection. Um, a second issue that I wanted to go over that LGBTQ plus students face is lack of representation. For instance, students in this population group can be described as absent within their curriculum as not much history is gone over, and only 16% of youth reported any mention of LGBTQ plus topics or issues in schools. Restrictive laws also add to lack of representation. For example, the two laws that I have listed there place restrictions on educators from discussing LGBTQ plus history and issues. The third issue faced by LGBTQ plus youth is scarcity of support. In the United States, only 9 states reported more than half of their schools had a gender and sexuality alliance. Support for these students is especially low in rural schools, especially in the South. Lack of support can also stem from insufficient educator training. Many degree programs across the US may not show educators how to meet the needs of this population. Now moving on, one law I wanted to go over is Florida House Bill 1557, or the Parental Rights in Education. It has also been referred to as the Don't Say Gay Bill. This bill was passed in 2022, and currently 19 states in the United States have passed bills with similar censorship, including Alabama and Florida. While a few revisions have been made recently, this bill ultimately restricts classroom instructions on sexual orientation and identity. It censors health and curriculum. It prohibits pronouns aligned with gender identity, and it also expands on book banning. This law has a negative impact on this group as it suppresses important conversations, which leads to greater stigmatization of this group and a hostile social environment. This law also contributes to students feeling unable to share their identity, which can also lead to adverse mental health outcomes. And a study taken or a survey taken after the enactment of this law found that 100% of the LGBTQ plus students surveyed reported in 100% of them an impact on their mental health. Another law I wanted to go over is California's Safety Act, which is very different from the previous one. This act was enacted in 2025, and it prevents educators from being required to share a student's gender identity, gender expression, or sexual orientation without consent or unless lawfully required. As far as impact, this act creates a supportive environment in which confidentiality is protected. It protects students and provides them and their families with the resources they need to thrive. And overall, this act aims to reduce the risk of harm and increase mental health support for identified students. To apply the Florida law as a school counselor, I would inform students of their limitations of confidentiality and their parents' right to know. I would honor a parent's right to know by immediately notifying them of any changes to their students' well-being or needed services, and also gaining consent from the parents when necessary. I would aim to create relationships with both students and parents. And while I would avoid providing curriculum on LGBTQ plus topics and history, I would still be available to answer questions on this topic if asked by a student outside of an instructional setting, as this study went through some recent, not the study, sorry, the law went through some recent changes that have expanded on it. Making sure that students know that I'm their advocate would be my number one goal. And overall, I would make sure to know my district's compliance procedures with the law and involve the necessary school personnel when in doubt. Above all, I would continue to act as a mandatory reporter if abuse is suspected, as this law makes this an exception for withholding student information. And fortunately for us in California, we don't have to worry about abiding by this act, but this is how I would respond to it. And to apply California's Safety Act, I would never share a student's gender status without their consent or a lawful requirement. I would also create supportive resources such as student support groups like GCAs. I would develop and provide resources for families and lead trainings to increase support for student and teachers, just to make sure that they feel supported both inside and outside of the school community. And these are my references. Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Who's next?
I'm going to share my screen right now. Can you guys see it? So for the historically underserved students, I chose the special needs population as well. I have experience both in SEC classrooms, so mod severe classes, and SAI department. So students in the SAI are students with IEPs, but they're still in general education. So some current issues and challenges that the special needs population face are academic and achievement gaps. So students with learning disabilities face systemic barriers. That just leads to overall gaps in multitude of subjects, and they just face the gap stems from lack of early interventions, lower expectations, and just overall lack of rigorous general education curricula. And another challenge is the mental health and social emotional. So a lot of students with special needs are burdened by stigma. They're viewed as less capable of academic success than their peers and are overall higher risks for social isolation, bullying, and reduced self-efficacy. Another challenge is inconsistent accommodations. So sometimes IEPs or 504 plans are kind of vague and without specific parameters. And sometimes this leads to teachers inconsistently implementing the accommodations across class periods. So this inconsistent implementation of the accommodations kind of leads students to suffer from, frustration, and it just leads to reduced trust in the school system, which is pretty preventable. And then another one is physical and social segregation. So this is more for the SEC mod severe classes. So students placed in these self-contained classroom just overall increased peer stigma and exclusion from the broader school community. And the physical isolation in separate classroom leads to lower student engagement and opportunities for meaningful social belonging. Two key federal laws are the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act and Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act of 1973. So IDEA is a type of federal special law passed in 1975 and was updated in 2004. So it just mandates that it guarantees a free, appropriate public education in the least restrictive environment for eligible students. Students that qualify have IEPs, and it just provides specialized instruction and accommodations. Students are eligible for IDEA through the evaluation and identified as having a disability under one of the 13 specific statutory categories. And for the Section 504, it's a federal civil rights law. And this law just prohibits discrimination against individuals with disabilities in programs receiving federal financial assistance. So it includes public schools. And then it just provides a Section 504 plan that outlines specific accommodations, just like IDEA. To be eligible for the Section 504, it's kind of more broader than the IDEA, and if a student qualifies if they have physical or mental impairment that limits one or more major life activities like learning, walking, seeing, or concentrating. So how do these laws affect students? Both IDEA and Section 504, they attempt to limit the playing field. So both laws' primary focus is to, ensure equal access to general education by tailoring or modifying assignments or allowing assistive technologies. So when accommodations are implemented reliably, students feel more supported and validated and capable of succeeding. But sometimes when, accommodations aren't, consistently applied, it leads to, frustration, and it just erodes student trust in teachers and the school system. It's also important to consistently support trust and self-efficacy, and then just a reminder that placing students in overly segregated environments can impact social belonging and peer stigma. So how, as a counselor, can I apply this knowledge to the profession? So advocacy, so participating in IEP or 504 team meetings to advocate for clear, actionable accommodation. and direct support. So providing one-on-one group counseling focused on building self-efficacy, self-advocacy skills, and coping strategies, and systemic inclusion. So just educating staff and collaborating with general education teachers to ensure that there's consistent implementation of accommodation across all class periods. And these are my references.
Thank you. Who's next?
Hello, I am. I'll be sharing right now. Okay, can everybody see my screen? Perfect, thank you. Okay, just like Jolisa, I'll also be speaking about supporting undocumented youth today. So some of the things, sorry, I gotta move my screen. So some of the current issues that I have seen that students face are fear of deportation for themselves and their loved ones, language and culture barriers, lack of resources, whether it be clothing, finance, food, shelter, discrimination, or violence, and also anxiety or stress with immigration uncertainty. So going along into my loved one, if this moves, there you go. We love FERPA here. So I'm also going to do FERPA as my first law today. So as we know that it protects the privacy of students' educational records, unless you are the biological immediate parent or guardian or the staff member that has legitimate educational interest that does have access to those records. But how does FERPA affect our undocumented student youth? So FERPA protects the privacy of all students and all students' educational records despite immigration status. Outside parties may not receive access to educational records without parental consent or legal exception. So it is unfortunate that yes, FERPA does hold the privacy of all the students unless there is a signed judicial warrant, and that is the only way. Say, for example, agents came to the school and if they had that official legal judicial warrant, then yes, they could obtain that information, but that would be the only way. So how does how does it affect the education and mental health to our students? That schools cannot share records without consent or legal exception. It encourages and creates safety for families to participate in school without fear that their information is going to be shared. Students can seek support when they understand their personal information is being protected. I also, in my previous role, had a lot to do with this. So it would be a lot of teaching our families their rights and also understanding that the information is not shared out just to be shared out. So that way the parents and the families and the students had more of a sense of letting go of that anxiety that schools would be sharing that information just because, which was not the case. So how to apply this as a school counselor? We will follow FERPA to protect student confidentiality. This also means making sure that our fellow staff members would also follow the same rules and applications to ensure that the student's privacy is being withheld. Connecting families with community and higher educational resources, ensuring undocumented students have equal opportunities to educational services. And as ASCA shares, that we must advocate for the ethical use of student data and records and inform administration of inappropriate harmful practices. This is like, for example, if you hear an office member sharing his information when it's not allowed to. So that way it's helping protect the student from anything that's not to be shared out loud. So into my second law, something that I chose was the McKinney-Vento Homeless Assistance Act. I do have a couple of years on there for the reason that the year got implemented, but there was updates throughout those years, throughout up until now. The reason I chose this is because when I would help students that were coming in with enrollments, we will have a lot of immigrant students that would come mid-year that didn't have a proper stable home or anywhere to live or lack of resources. So that way, through this act, it actually helped out a lot of students and still does to this day, making sure they have the free access to education that they rightfully have. So what is it? It's a federal law that was set in place to ensure that youth experiencing homelessness have equal access to public education. This law supports students staying enrolled in school and continuing to have access to services that support academic success, even with unstable housing. So how does this affect undocumented youth? So as mentioned before, I've seen students coming into the United States without legal immigration status. A lot of them might experience as unstable housing. So I know something that could happen, like, oh, they're sharing a home with another family member here. But when doing enrollment, it's still considered not a stable home for the child. So that way we could offer them extra resources and get them free access to education at the school site. Students can enroll immediately in a public school setting with missing documents such as residency, immunization, or previous records. and receive access to all school programs and resources. So educational and mental health impacts. It increases school attendance by removing documentation and residency barriers, improve academic performance by providing school stability and access to resources. It reduces anxiety that is connected to the lack of education or the inability to enroll to a school, and reduce the feelings of isolation by connecting students to their school community, whether it be staff members such as ourselves or with their peers such as other students. And then how, as future school counselors, what can we apply? We can create a welcoming, supportive, and safe school environment for all. Also, advocating for immediate enrollment if we are to receive families with this situation, advocating for their immediate enrollment and see what needs to be done to get them enrolled into the school. Connect and build relationships with families for check-ins and connect to community resources. But also, as many of our public schools, we do have, I didn't know the proper name until now, which is the McKinney-Vento liaison. At my former school said it was the homeless liaison. So you could work with that homeless liaison to be able to provide extra resources to those families that remove the educational barriers. For example, it could be stuff for where they're currently staying at. Maybe it be hygiene items, shoes, anything that helps those students be able to get to school and assist them on their day-to-day basis. And then for my conclusion, I just placed undocumented youth encounter a variety of educational, emotional, and household challenges, many of which we may not be aware of unless we are in that position ourselves. With laws such as FERPA and McKinney-Vento supporting our undocumented youth as future school counselors, we must continue to ensure these laws are enforced and protect student rights. And then my references. Thank you.
Thank you. Who's next?
I have two. I'm not sure which one's going to work, but I'm going to try it. Sorry, it's saying I have to quit and reopen. Hold on. Can someone else go first and then I'll quit and reopen?
I can go.
Oh, sure.
Oh, you want to go ahead?
Yes. No matter. Go ahead, Ariana.
Okay. 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 Can y'all see? Uh, okay. Okay, so I did my project on foster youth as well. So the title of mine is Supporting Foster Youth Through School Counseling and Federal Law, two laws that shape their education and well-being. Foster students need support because they experience frequent placement changes, often happening mid-year, disrupting instruction and credits. They miss more days and have higher unmet behavioral needs than their peers. For example, a middle schooler placed mid-semester may lose credits, exit extracurricular activities, and struggle with like PTSD symptoms, which could stop them from concentrating. Some challenges, is history of abuse or neglect, frequent school changes, higher rates of anxiety, depression, post-traumatic stress disorder, lower attendance and graduation rates, and difficulty like building rapport with and trusting relationships with adults. So the first law that I wanted to focus on was the McKinney-Vento Homeless Assistance Act. And this act basically protects the students' education rights because some students in foster care qualify when they experience housing instability after leaving foster care. It provides immediate school enrollment. It eliminates documentation barriers, and it allows students to remain like in their original school. And they also have like equal rights to transportation and education. And it matters because educational stability reduces learning loss and emotional distress during the periods of, losing the house or not having nowhere to stay. The second one I did was the Family First Act, and some key features of that is it expands trauma-informed mental health services. It encourages keeping children safely with families when and if possible. It supports evidence-based prevention programs, and it improves coordination between schools and child's welfare agencies. The educational impact of this is there are fewer placement disruptions. Kids are able to have emotional regulation. There's increased school attendance and improved academic performance because of the stability. The mental health effect of these laws, some positive things like research shows that educational stability, research shows that educational stability and access to mental health supports improve both academic and social emotional development. It reduces trauma-related stress. Students have a greater sense of safety. Stronger relationships are built with school staff. Increased access to counseling services, and improve self-esteem and resilience. Both increase access to supports, but it varies from different systems and levels. My role as a school counselor, or how I would implement this, I will always advocate for students' legal rights. I would collaborate with stakeholders like foster parents, caseworkers, teachers, principals. I use trauma-informed counseling techniques and develop individualized plans and supports. I will monitor attendance and academic progress closely and connect families with community mental health resources. According to Stone, school counselors should protect student confidentiality, advocate for educational equity, understand federal and state laws, collaborate with stakeholders, and act in the student's best interests while following ethical standards. Foster students thrive when school stability is a deliberate priority, minimizing moves, coordinating supports, and applying trauma-informed practices. As counselors, our ongoing documentation, collaboration, and ethical safeguards turn policy into reliable educational rights for everyone. In conclusion, foster youth, they face significant educational and mental health challenges. Federal laws help improve educational access and emotional well-being. School counselors play a critical role in advocacy, collaboration, and trauma-informed support, and understanding legal protections allow us counselors to promote equity and student success. References, and that's it.
Thank you. Who's next?
I can try again. Let me see if it works. Can you see it?
Yes, we can see it.
Okay. So I did ethnic minorities, but I was choosing to focus specifically on Indigenous students. When I was doing my research, I found some historical challenges going all the way back to 1969. So historically, Indigenous students have been unrepresented or underrepresented, in the study that I found, or the Senate investigation, historically they've been underfinanced. Some their schools have been underfinanced relative to need. They've had deficient academic outcomes, unsatisfactory quality and effectiveness of instruction, seriously deficient guidance and counseling programs, and they were described as rigid and impersonal in the school environment. And this is going all the way back to 1969. So these were some of the challenges from 1969. With the current challenges, they're still facing academic barriers that are persistent, they're measurable. They have a high school graduation rate of 74%, which might sound a little bit on the higher end, but it's actually not. It's the lowest of any ethnic group in the United States, and it's falling to 53% with schools that are part of the Bureau of Indian Education. Their youth dropout rate is 1 in 10. and that's for Native youth ages 16 to 24. And only 16.8% actually attain a bachelor's degree, which is still far below the 2023 national rate of 36.2%. Some of the mental health concerns that are facing are from historical trauma. Obviously, Indigenous students or their ancestors, they survived colonization, genocide, forced relocation, cultural assimilation. And a lot of this stems back from the boarding era from the 1860s to the 1960s. And that's when a lot of the trauma is rooted in students being forced into boarding schools, Indigenous children forced into boarding schools. And they were basically forced to separate from their families, and they were punished for practicing their culture and their language. So now they're dealing with a legacy of having this soul wound of intergenerational grief that's been carried on within the Indigenous communities. And that often manifests in depression and anxiety in students today. There are also another current challenge is disproportionate discipline. So it's 2 times overrepresented versus the amount of enrollment. So Indigenous students make up just 1% of K through 12 enrollment, yet they account for 2% of referrals to law enforcement and school-related arrests. Same thing, double overrepresentation for corporal punishment. Indigenous boys make up less than 1% of total enrollment, but they receive 2% of all corporal punishments administered in schools, and also overrepresented with harassment and bullying reports. Indigenous students account for 1% of enrollment, but 2% of students report being harassed or bullied based on race, sex, or disability. Another current challenge is their access to resources and support. So they have about $8,000 per pupil funding, which is far below what the U.S. public school average is of $17,000. And then the Department of Defense is usually $25,000. They face infrastructure crisis of $8 billion. So there's $8 billion in backlogs of school constructions. They usually deal with going to school in with HVAC systems that are failing, mold, asbestos. And then there's also a digital divide because 1 in 3 Indigenous students lack broadband access to internet. And then the last current challenge is stigma, bias, and discrimination. So they do face deficit-based stereotypes like being viewed as alcoholics, being viewed as high school dropouts. A lot of their curricula is one-sided and it is presented from the colonial account. It doesn't really take into account the Indigenous perspective, also dealing with microaggressions in higher education. The 2 relevant laws that I chose were Title VI of ESA, which is formerly the Indian Education Act of 1972. It provides access to services and supports because this one provides grant funding for local education and agencies and public schools. And they give this funding for programs that are tailored for Native American students. It reduces barriers because it expands federal support to Native students who are attending public schools, and it supplements some of those educational resources to be able to provide educational opportunities. It helps protect their rights because it allows Indigenous students to, their parents are basically required to be involved in this, and they have to consult with tribal education agencies for any sort of planning or decision making. And then social emotional success, it supports them in learning or having their language, native language, and culturally responsive education to be able to meet their needs. The other one I have is the Johnson-O'Malley Act of 1934. Again, this is another one that provides support. So it expanded access to local public education and provided supplemental funding for whether it's like meals, school supplies, medical examinations, tutoring. It helps reduce barriers because it provides additional funding for school-related costs that support Native students. Protects rights because again, it strengthens the relationship between Native students, and it gives their parents and their communities a more formal role in establishing committees to have a say in what kind of educational programming they have. And then this one also supports their social emotional success because it provides academic support, helps with cultural identity, and then it again expands access to essential health and student services. And then the last part, application, is a school counselor. So to apply these laws in practice as a counselor, we can provide academic and career support using the fundings from Title VI and GOM to support after-school programming, homework help. We can also do crisis and prevention programming. So using those funds as critical funds for mental health initiatives like suicide, violence, substance abuse prevention, helping them out with their establishing identification so that they can meet the requirements for this program. They have to do an ED 506, which is the form to show eligibility, and then also establish wraparound services with other like Title I, IDEA, the McKinney-Vento, which was already mentioned, to create this circle of success for students. Advocate for systems change that could be data justice, like recognizing that Native American students and citizens are part of sovereign nations. It's really over 600 individual tribes with 400 languages. It's not just one clumped together group. Curriculum reform, tribal sovereignty, basically making sure that the district meets requirements so that they can have consultations for their educational plans. Collaborate with families and staff, make sure the parents are involved in oversight, building that community of trust, and then professional development for staff, making sure they're informed of historical trauma, cultural taboos, and then last one is to establish an ethical and culturally responsive practice, recognizing that their trauma is rooted from those historical aspects of the boarding school era, and then just affirming their Native American identity as they walk through these two different worlds of culture in modern day society. That's it.
Thank you. Who's next?
I'm next. Sorry. Okay, so I also still selected undocumented students for my group. So current issues and challenges that students have, fear and anxiety, so fear of being deported or family separation, which can cause stress, absences, and difficulty concentrating. Limited access to information, so resources that can limit opportunities and college access. Misinformation, so confusing or inaccurate info, rights and eligibility. And I did this more so with the lens of college access and the work that I've been doing with students, undocumented students specifically. So discrimination, undocumented students may experience bias, bullying, and unequal treatment. Policy changes, so changing laws and policies that create uncertainty for students and their families. One of the big ones was with financial aid, that information was supposed to be protected. And under the new administration, it was discussed that ICE could have access to this information. So that was a huge thing that impacted some of our students and their families, or mixed status families. And then lack of support. So many students lack access to culturally responsive supports and safe spaces at schools. And then, okay. So the first law that I have, for some reason I can't see all of my screen, was the Plyler case, where the U.S. Supreme Court ruled that states cannot deny undocumented children access to free public K-12 education, and this was a Texas case that took place, and it was that adults were the ones who made the decision for children to come here undocumented, so the children should not be punished. So schools cannot deny enrollment based on students' immigration status, and it ensures equal educational opportunities for all students. The second law is AB 540, which is a California state law, allows eligible students, including undocumented students, to pay in-state tuition at California public colleges and universities. So it does help reduce the cost for students. And with this law, those students generally qualify for Cal Grant, which would cover their tuition at the community colleges, Cal States, and UCs, should they be eligible for the full amount. So students must meet California school attendance and graduation requirements, meaning they need 3 full years of school, whether that was any grade, K-12, as long as they meet that, then they would qualify for this. Or after they graduate high school, they can go to an adult school or take community college classes that they would have to pay for, though, to meet that requirement. So it doesn't provide immigration status or federal financial aid. It helps make college more affordable and within reach for undocumented students. So how they affect students, the Plyler versus Doe, in terms of mental health, it increases safety, belonging, and stability, reduces fear of being excluded from school. And with educational functioning, it supports school access and attendance, promotes continuity, engagement, and learning. And with AB 540, mental health, reducing the stress of college, costs, increasing hope, motivation, and confidence about the future. And educational functioning makes college more affordable, encourages students to apply, enroll, and persist through college. There are still challenges that remain, including financial stress. The Cal Grant that the students would generally receive doesn't cover a lot of outside costs. So students who may want to live on campus don't always have that opportunity because they still don't qualify for federal money that would help other students. So how I would support these students as a school counselor. So explaining the AB 540 eligibility, what that means, helping students complete the California Dream Act application, which is their financial aid application. That's the equivalent to the FAFSA on the federal level, connecting students with scholarships, dream centers at local colleges that would be beneficial to them, and then protecting the students' confidentiality and avoiding necessary disclosure of their status, and providing emotional support, advocacy, and encouragement throughout the whole process. And then my references.
Thank you.
Lauren, I think you were next because I was going to go after you, but if you're not ready, I can go.
No, Jennifer E is next.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah. Sorry, 1 second.
Christina, you can go next after Jennifer E.
Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Okay. So I'm going to be talking about undocumented youth, which is one of the historically underserved student population. I'll first explain some of the challenges these students face. Then I'll talk about 2 important laws that protect their educational rights. After that, I'll explain how these laws affect students' mental health and education. And then I'll share how I would apply these laws as a future school counselor. Undocumented students face many challenges that can affect both their education and their mental health. One of the biggest challenges is fear. Some students worry that they or someone in their family could be deported. Living with that kind of uncertainty can cause like a lot of stress, anxiety, and make it really difficult to focus in school. Some students also experience discrimination or bullying because of their immigration status or because of their cultural background. Others may be afraid to ask for help because they don't know their rights or they worry that their personal information could be shared. Financial barriers is also another challenge. Many of these undocumented students worry about how they will pay for college or whether they will be having the same opportunity as other students. All of these challenges can affect attendance, grades, motivation, and overall emotional well-being. So for the first law, Flyer versus Doe, which was decided by the United States Supreme Court in 1982. This law says that all children have the right to attend public elementary and high school, even if they are undocumented. Schools cannot refuse to enroll a student because of their immigration status. They also cannot require proof of citizenship before allowing a child to attend school. This law is important because it gives every child access to an education. Without this protection, many students could be denied the opportunity to learn simply because of their immigration status. Education gives students opportunities for the future, so this law plays an important role in creating equal access. The second law is the California Assembly Bill 699, also known as the Safe Haven Schools Act. This law was created to help protect immigrant students while they are at school. It limits immigration enforcement activities on school campuses unless legal requirements are met. It also helps protect student records and encourages schools to create a safe and a welcoming environment for all students and families. This is especially important in California because many schools serve students from immigrant families. When families trust that schools are safe places, students are more likely to attend school regularly, participate in class, and ask for help when they need it. These two laws protect students in different ways, but they both help improve mental health and educational outcomes. When students know they have the right to attend school and feel protected while they are there, they often experience less fear and anxiety. Feeling safe also helps students concentrate a lot better, attend school more consistently, participate in class, and build positive relationship with peers, teachers, and counselors. A safe and supportive school environment gives students the chance to focus on learning instead of constantly worrying about their future. As a future school counselor, I would make sure some I'm sorry. As a future school counselor, I would make sure undocumented students know that school is a safe place where they are respected and they are supported. I would keep student information confidential and make sure students and families understand their educational rights. I would also provide emotional support, help connect families with community resources, and advocate for equal access to school programs and other opportunities. I would work closely with teachers, administrators, or families to create an inclusive school environment where every student feels welcome. My goal would be to help students feel safe, supported, and confident so they can focus on reaching their academic and personal goals. To conclude, undocumented youth face many challenges that can affect both their education and their mental health. However, the laws like the Flyer versus Doe and the California AB 699 help protect their rights to learn in a safe environment. As a future school counselor, we have an important responsibility to advocate for these students, protect their rights, and provide the support that they need to succeed. and these are my references. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all for your patience. We just have three more to go. If you can just hang in there. We have Jennifer. Go ahead, Jennifer. And then we have Christina and we have Lauren. Jennifer, you're muted.
It would be that. I was like having everything ready. Okay, let's try this again. Okay, can you see it's not doing a full screen now?
It's fine. Go ahead.
Okay, perfect. So there's a little bit of a gray area when you think of a homeless youth. You think they don't have a home, and there's a different definitions that have been presented. And so there were two bipartisan Congress members, one that began in 1987 and the other in the year 2000. One named Stuart McKinney, the other contributed Bruce Vento, and they came up with a federal definition that schools abide by, which is called McKinney-Vento. And there's an act that describes what the definition of a homeless youth is. It could be sharing a home, it could be facing economic hardship, living in a motel or hotel. Couch surfing is a term in there used, living in cars, public spaces. So that is what is considered a homeless youth by a federal definition. But just to be clear, it is not a crime to be homeless. People can choose whatever way they want to live. But as our job as a school counselor is to support and make sure that they're safe. Courts do distinguish between the status of being unhoused, which is not against the law, but they do have repercussions for homelessness or houselessness, which can be legal ramifications. So a few of the reasons for being homeless, there could be a family situation, there could be all sorts of abuse, physical, mental, substance abuse, neglect with food, clothing, basic needs. If there's pregnancy, the child is having concerns with safety, sexual orientation. Those are some reasons. Financial obligations, which are self-explanatory. There could be loss of job, poverty. But then also there are a large demographic of foster youth that do choose to be homeless due to transition, lack of support, lack of stability, or because they have emancipated themselves, which means legally independent from an adult guardian. Some current challenges that homeless youth face are physical, mental, and legal challenges. Physically, when they don't have a steady home, it often comes with lack of food, but there's also other health issues like asthma, tuberculosis, diabetes, depending on what medical issues they are exposed to, risk for assault, which then will lead to sexually transmitted disease. So there are a lot of physical challenges, but there are a lot of mental that come with it as well, because when you don't have a stable home, you don't have consistency, it creates anxiety, depression, post-traumatic disorder, and then they are a risk for suicide. And again, going back to the legal ramifications, it does, often involve illegal activities to get money. They might be dealing drugs, prostitution. If they're sleeping in public areas, that does come with law enforcement encounters, and then creates fines and then creates a criminal record. So there is a long thing. But there are two laws we've heard about: McKinney-Vento, the Homeless Assistance Act. It requires schools to automatically enroll a student connect them with a federally mandated community liaison, which we did hear about as well. Every school site or district should have one, which can connect them with basic needs, mental health resources, and community services. And then the McKinney-Vento Act also supports educational stability, which provides not only mental health access, but also equitable education access. Another legal act that supports homeless youth is the Mental Health Services Act. We did hear a lot about FERPA as well, which obviously could be applied because of keeping their confidentiality. But I thought the Mental Health Service Act was important because a lot of these students may not have access to medical care, and there is mental health supports. We have the PAT teams on most sites, which is the psych team, that if they are struggling with the PTSD, any sort of anxiety, depression, that they can get the mental health support at a school site. And we can't always prevent homelessness, but we can provide intervention options because the liaison does have communication with different community resources that can help provide them with their basic needs, or at least direct them to who can help. As a school counselor, I can connect, support, and build. Connect is really important because it's not just connecting with the student, it's also recognizing the signs and red flags, for lack of a better word, of when a student might need help. That can come if they're not eating breakfast in the morning, they're coming late, they are having to leave early to catch a bus, just checking those things. Establishing a relationship, checking in, noticing them is huge. Just noticing that they're at school is huge. Know the referrals, who's the liaison, who's the psych team. Do we have any local resources that can help them, and collaborate with their teachers, collaborate with administrators, collaborate with anyone we can, nursing or medical health assistants, and then really connect with the teachers on their ed rights, making sure that they have school stability. We can support them by keeping their confidentiality, and then making sure we advocate for their equitable access to the education, not only for the classroom assignments, but also for the discipline, offer and extend grace, and advocate, when we can, and share the information that we are able to. But we can build the student by educating them with the resources, intervening when we can, and then preventing what we can as school counselors. I did find there was not a lot of direction aside from the legal notes, but if you have a chance and you do connect with houseless youth in your current sites, from 2016, there was a document created by the federal government called the Supporting the Success of Homeless Children. It does have outdated information. Right now, they're estimating about 300,000 youth, but again, that area is gray because it could go up to about early 20s. So it's not just, teens and high school students. It does have a little bit of a range. This has more specific numbers. So if you are interested in reading, if you do connect with these students, it does have not just about McKinney-Vento, but a little bit of guidance on what you can do if it comes to you, if they have concerns. And if you need direction, it does give basic resources. So it's called Supporting the Success of Homeless Children and Youth. I know that was a little bit fast just for being aware of time, but these are my resources. In California, there's a lot of advocacy for homeless youth and support. And as school counselors, we can often be the first point of contact. And if not the first point of contact, we can also be the first point of direction to get them aid. Thank you.
Thank you. Christina.
Thank you, Adriana, for sharing my slides. I also did foster youth. Next slide. Foster youth are children who have been removed from their homes due to abuse or neglect, and most of the time it is due to poverty. Next slide, please. Some challenges for foster youth, instability because there's the possibility they're going to be moving often. They can move it in as many as 8 different placements. Their absenteeism is also a challenge. It's the highest rate of chronic absence is from foster youth. That could be due to transportation or court dates or parent visitation, school changes. And also an issue is graduation rates. There is the graduation rate by youth in California is 83%, and for foster students, foster youth, it's 53%. The first bill that I wanted to address was AB 490, which was passed in 2004. This gave school districts, told school districts that, there's social service agencies, other professionals, additional professionals in the foster youth life that have responsibility to facilitate educational equity. And really, it's to prevent educational disruptions so that students can stay in their school of origin or the last school that they were on, to provide a district foster care liaison, immediate enrollment, timely transfer of records, and the caseworker and probation officer can access those records. AB 490, how it affects educational functioning and mental health. It puts stability in the foster youth educational setting, which is really the most important thing while they're going through the traumatic experience, to have some stability in their friendships and their home school. That was the intention of AB 490. How I would apply this law as a school counselor, it clearly states who has access to the foster youth educational records, which is important as school counselor to understand who can see which records. And it provides protection for grades and credits. So grades can't fall below, students can't fall behind if they have to go to court hearings or they miss school. Also, the school district must have the educational liaison, which will help to create that connection. My next law is Senate Bill 967. So this prohibits the University of California and California State University campuses from charging mandatory system-wide tuition or fees to current or former foster youth who meet certain requirements for the total equivalent of attendance in a four-year school. So they have to meet the requirements of being 25 or younger, have had been in foster care for 12 months in total after reaching 10 years of age, complete the FAFSA, maintain a GPA, and be in good standing with the school, and not exceed the total of 4 years for attendance. How this helps educational functioning and mental health. It provides access to higher education that has positive health effects for foster youth by providing accessibility and hope for the future. When given this information, foster youth may set goals for their future, even when the current situation is unstable. As a school counselor, just sharing this pathway with foster youth, gathering information for this and other programs designed for foster youth and higher education, sharing this information with the community to help other foster youth. Just understanding that this is a historically underserved population, prevalent in the public school systems across California. Understanding their needs, as well as some of the important laws that support them, will help in our role as school counselors. And then I have my references and my links to more information. Thank you.
Thank you, Lauren.
Okay, I'll start sharing 1 second. Okay, are you guys able to see my screen? Okay. So a lot of people tend to think that homelessness means only living on the street. However, it can also include students that are living in shelters, motels or hotels, vehicles, campgrounds, or even staying with family or friends temporarily because they had currently lost their housing. With homeless youth, they face a variety of challenges, mostly with housing instability. And during the 2022 to 2023 school year, public schools have identified that there are more than 1.4 million students that are currently experiencing homelessness. And because students and their families are constantly moving around, a lot of this time students can feel that it can impact their ability to learn in a classroom and make it a lot harder for them to make friends and just overall kind of creates a wall between establishing a relationship with either teachers or other kinds of school staff. Along with housing instability, they also have food insecurity, lack of transportation, and little to no access to school supplies, technology, or even being chronically absent. So, along with academics, it can also have a very detrimental effect to a student's mental health. A lot of the time, students that are homeless experience chronic stress, anxiety, depression, trauma, and even feelings of uncertainty because they don't know where they will live on a day-to-day basis. So, like a lot of my peers have mentioned, the law that I found is the McKinney-Vento Homeless Assistance Act, which was established in 1987. And it was, in short, it was just a federal law that was created to ensure that those that are homeless are not prevented from receiving the free and appropriate public education. Um, and this law also requires schools to immediately enroll students, even if they lack the documents that they would need to usually enroll, which is like proof of residency, immunization records, or even previous school transcripts. Um, like Jennifer had mentioned, it's really best that we keep in contact frequently with the homeless liaison and make sure that these kinds of students are getting all the support they could get at the given time. Let's see. Another law I found was the Every Student Succeeds Act, and this basically means that every student should be be able to be able to increase their access to the academic interventions, be able to get tutoring when they need it, as well as any other academic kinds of support. And from like a mental health perspective, this act can promote early identification of students who may particularly benefit from counseling, and maybe we would be able to address their overall emotional concern as their condition or their housing situation can become more serious over time. And as a future school counselor, I would particularly apply this law by collaborating with parents, their teachers, administrators, and any other community partners that we can try and help identify those that are experiencing early onset homelessness in hopes so that we can monitor their academic progress and provide a variety of services for them. And with both of these laws, it can really support the students that are experiencing homelessness. As a school counselor, I would ensure that my responsibility would be to extend beyond just providing counseling. I would go to measures to make sure I advocate for their legal rights, remove any barriers that may interfere with their learning, and just overall ensure that each and every student receives the educational protections that are guaranteed under both laws. I would also try and provide individual and small group counseling using trauma-informed practices as a way for students to better manage their stress or anxiety that may stem from housing instability. And lastly, in conclusion, those that are experiencing homelessness face, as aforementioned, a significant amount of challenges that can affect their educational functioning and mental health. But with both of these laws, both the McKinney-Vento Act as well as the ESSA law, it would hopefully in turn create a lot more equitable educational opportunities for these kinds of students, as well as promoting their well-being. And as future skill counselors, we play such a vital role in applying these laws by consistently advocating for students and making sure we're collaborating with anyone that's able to support them as a whole. And we also have to ensure that every student, regardless of their housing situation, has the opportunity to grow and succeed academically. That's it.
Right. Thank you, everyone, for such a great presentations and your patience as well as we got through our large class and supported one another through our presentations. Thank you all. Have a great evening, and I will see you week 7. Good night.
Thank you.